looked at Taylor Swift's Synastry with her exes, Alwyn and Karlie Kloss, for the first time, and let me just say, it changed my opinion on some stuff. For example, I've mostly been a toe believer, but then I saw this chart and I was like, 6 years? You spent 6 years together with a chart like this? The odds just aren't in his favor. Like, he would have had to have been born in a half-an-hour window for this to make any romantic sense. However, when you contrast this with Taylor's Synastry with Karlie Kloss, first of all, there's definitely a past life connection here, but secondly, there is a lot more like sexy, romantic, soulmatey kind of vibes here. Welcome back to the Wilding Astro Tarot YouTube channel for a little astrology video on Taylor Swift's Synastry with some of her now ex-lovers. In this video, I'm going to include some Synastry with her most recent ex, Alwyn, as well as her previous ex, Karlie Kloss. So yeah, that's the vibe of the day. I've very briefly looked at Taylor's Synastry with Karlie Kloss before, but I've never seen her Synastry with Alwyn until today. And so I've literally just pulled them up and we're just gonna be shooting the shit. Like, I'm just gonna bring it up and tell you what I see straight off the bat without thinking about it, without like making any premeditated thoughts or points. I'm just going to look at it and see what it is. I didn't try super hard to find Alwyn's correct rising sign, so we've got his chart unorientated as a little disclaimer. I have some thoughts already on what his rising sign could be, but yeah, I didn't go through the process of doing a proper birth time rectification for him. If you really want me to, leave me a comment. I may or may not do it. I usually don't waste my time on men, but I might if the demand is high. I might do it. So yeah, let me know if that's what you want to see. But yeah, just a little disclaimer. We have much more accurate birth information for the Taylor Swift Karlie Kloss Synastry than we do the Alwyn Taylor Swift Synastry, but I'm still going to talk about it all the same because there's lots we can say without knowing that those particular details, especially because we're pretty sure of what Taylor Swift's birth time is, which if you want to know why we're pretty sure, you can go check out my previous video. I talked about some of the possible options in terms of Taylor's rising sign and what I think it is. I'm going to be using her Scorpio rising because that's the birth information that I think is correct personally based on my own astrological professional opinion. But yeah, now that all the disclaimers are out of the way, let's first do her Synastry with Alwyn and then we'll do her Synastry with Karlie Kloss. So if you want to know what her Synastry is, stick around. Okay, so the very first thing I'm seeing with the Synastry between Taylor Swift and Alwyn, which is super interesting, is that Joe's Lilith is conjunct Taylor's Destiny, Asteroid, and Sun conjunction. So Taylor Swift has a Sun, which is the star, which is the center of our universe, or our solar system more correctly, in her first house that's also conjunct her Destined asteroid, which is an asteroid that does exactly what it sounds like, depicts destiny. So Taylor's always been destined to be a star, especially since this is in her first house. So it's very much giving, I'm a star, I'm destined to be a star. And what's interesting about the Black Moon Lilith is it's a very feministy kind of energy. And I find it so interesting that Joe's feminism energy is right on Taylor's kind of star energy. And I do feel like in the time that Joe and Taylor have been associated in the public, Taylor has become more of a feminist icon. So that, like, first of all, that jumped out to me. I'm like, that's super interesting. The other thing that I find super interesting is that Joe's Destined asteroid, again, tied with destiny, falls in Taylor's 4th house, which is her private life. So it does seem like potentially they were crossing paths for a reason, and for like just knowing Taylor's business as much as she allows us to know, kind of feels like he was like maybe always supposed to be there to keep her private life private a little bit. They also have in the same house of privacy and Taylor's house of private life, they also have a conjunction between Joe's Venus and Taylor's Pallas asteroid, which is very creative. So you kind of got to love creative conjunction in private, which is interesting. I don't know immediately what to make of that. It's got some positive aspects to some of their other conjunctions, and then also a harsher aspect to Taylor's Cancer stellium, which I find interesting, which is an 8th house stellium, which is like kind of soul connections, or like soulmates often fall in 8th house synastry. So yeah, it's interesting that there's tension there, but then there's some harmonious aspects with the ascendant as well as Taylor's Venus. I'm like not sold on anything, just based on especially not knowing what Joe's house situation is and where this is falling for him. But what I will say is that this tension, this square does, first of all, square her like more soulmatey house, a 8th house, but it also squares her Jupiter, which is the husband or the wife in astrology, which I just find very interesting. They've only got really tense oppositions and squares between each of their Jupiters with each other's placements, which I would say, like, what the interpretation that I'm leaning towards is that they were always going to break up. They were never going to make it, because some tension's fine, but you do want, like, at least some harmonious aspects to balance out the tension in relationships, especially with Jupiter, given that Jupiter symbolizes the husband or the wife in astrology. To me, it kind of looks like it was never going to be endgame kind of thing. And something else that's super interesting is that Taylor's Venus conjuncts Joe's Saturn exactly. So that can straight away can indicate more of a karmic relationship potentially. More so if they met before Joe's Saturn return, which I might need to look that up. I'm pretty sure it didn't, because he's a late Capricorn Saturn, or I can't even see it properly. It might even be, yeah, I think it's a late Saturn or early Aquarius. So it was before his Saturn return, which is just not a good sign. If you have Saturn conjunctions, you want to meet them after their Saturn return. So if you have Saturn conjunctions to like Venus, Jupiter, the descendant, anything like that, usually it doesn't work out if you meet them a long time before their Saturn return, so before Saturn's in the sign that's returning, or close to it. I would say you want to meet them within the year that their Saturn return starts or after. If it's too far before, it's just not a good omen, because Saturn, after it's been through its return, is more of like a lock it down, this is the one, this is my forever kind of thing. I'm going to be able to commit to this person. But before the Saturn return, it's much more malefic. So yeah, just not a good sign. So yeah, I would say, just based on the timing of things and the Venus-Saturn conjunction and all of the oppositions to and squares to each other's Jupiters, it doesn't look like a forever thing. However, I will say there are some really cute things of like lots of kind of cute support at the same time. Like it is cute. I do like it. We have Joe's Moon and Vesta conjunct Taylor's descendant, which is cute. It's very supportive, very nurturing, like kind of I'll always be there for you energy. I don't love that his Mars is in her 7th house, because Mars obviously prefers to be in especially someone's 1st or 8th house. I kind of like it in the 5th house for like sexual chemistry. But in the 7th, obviously Mars can be a bit malefic, especially if you're meeting someone before their Saturn return. Mars tends to be a bit more malefic as well. And so, yeah, I don't love that in that house. But yeah, the moon Vesta is like definitely like, I'll always support you. I'm always here for you energy. The thing about the 7th house and the descendant, it's supportive relationships, but it can be any relationship. It could be like a business relationship, anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. And so that's probably why I would also like to see maybe a Venus or something in there as well. I think if Joe is a Leo rising, which I don't think he can be just based on his appearance, then Taylor's Venus and his North Node and Saturn would all be in a reasonably close conjunction together in his 7th house, which would be cute. But I think it's more likely that he's a Cancer rising just because he's very kind of like luminous looking. You kind of see with Leo risings, they're like very warm because they're like sun ruled, whereas Cancer risings are more luminous. And I kind of feel like potentially Joe and Karlie Kloss have the same rising sign because there's definitely something like they look very similar. Like they're both definitely giving Cancer rising with that kind of luminosity to their skin. So yeah, I don't really think Joe could be a Leo rising. If he is, it's a better indication for his relationship with Taylor. If he's not, it's not really the vibe. I'm just going to say right now. So some other really cute support things that I see is a conjunction between Joe's Ceres asteroid, which is a very nurturing, very familial energy. It does like lean more towards a more like kind of mothery energy, but it is just like very generally nurturing family energy right on Taylor's feminist energy. So you've kind of got like double feminist kind of support in this connection, which is cute. But this is also happening in Taylor's 11th house of friendship. So there's definitely lots of like friend vibes. And so, yeah, like I kind of feel like they will stay friends just based on a few of these like supportive relationships, potentially even continue to work together in the future at some point. Because yeah, there's lots of harmonious aspects for that. Especially because in addition, Joe's Sun and Mercury both fall in Taylor's 3rd house of publicity. So like kind of honestly, like this is really, really good energy for a PR relationship. Not saying that their relationship was only PR, but like if you want to be with someone and you want that to have a really positive effect in terms of the public relations sphere, having something like that going on with the 3rd house is just like chef's kiss, like perfection. Like obviously because the sun lights up and Mercury is very clever and Mercury's like loves being in the 3rd house, given that 3rd house is like a Gemini-ish house. And the 3rd house also sits at a biquintile to the 10th house. Biquintiles being like a very harmonious soulmate kind of aspect, especially like even though it's a minor aspect, like it's just like it's super supportive. Like the house before and after, whatever house is in the opposition position to a house, they're always just like super supportive to that house. So like this is really good. Joe has really good synastry with Taylor to help her career, to help Taylor's 10th house of her like very public self, her career, like having the Sun and Mercury at a biquintile to that house, to her MC line, and having those two placements fall in her 3rd house is just like really, really good for her career. And just like it's going to be well received by the public as well. So yeah, I kind of love that. Like there's lots of really cute things in their chart in terms of support, friendship, working together, like definitely really good like business relationship vibes for sure. The last kind of major thing that I noticed is obviously there's a lot going on in the sign of Capricorn for these guys. Given that Taylor's a Capricorn stellium, he actually has lots of placements in Capricorn. The thing that's kind of a little bit kind of hard is that Joe has his Uranus and Juno exactly conjunct Taylor's Saturn, which Saturn is soul work. Uranus can be soul contracts. Juno is very supportive. So it can be a soul contract here to help with Taylor's soul calling. So again, like businessy, or just like Taylor's personal legend. Like looks like there's some sort of soul contract for him to support her career in some way, especially because her MC ruler, her career line ruler, is also in this conjunction. It's sitting out a little bit from it, but it is in there. So that's like nice for her career, but like there is some like Neptune-y, which can be like kind of deception and just like fantasy imagination kind of vibes. So I don't know what that's doing in there, but Neptune does kind of like lean a bit malefic, and does kind of give a bit of malefic vibes to me, especially if you meet someone again before their Saturn return, before their whole chart is like fully locked in, and before they're like a mature adult in terms of like the eyes of astrology. It's just, it like, to me, it's just giving it could get messy at some point. But at the same time, yeah, again, Joe supporting her. It's a lot of really Joe supporting her. I don't see it kind of going both ways. To be fair, we don't know his house system, so his house orientation. So, like, if we knew, potentially there could be signs of him being more supported by her. But just based on what we know, it looks like a lot of Joe supporting Taylor. I don't know if it goes both ways by the looks of things, which I can imagine would be really hard. That's what I'm seeing for these guys. And I don't think I really see anything else. The only thing I really needed to mention is all of that Capricorn stuff is going on directly opposite Taylor's soulmate sign, Jupiter, in the 8th house, which is also not a good sign for like long term, but like a good sign for like temporary support, especially business support, maybe not soulmate romantic support, which is more that Jupiter energy. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting synastry, to be honest. So overall, I would say the vibes with this is definitely like more leaning like supportive, potentially more business orientated, without knowing Joe's house orientation, which honestly could change a lot. There could be more kind of romance things. At the moment, there's not really a lot of good synastry with Taylor's 5th house or 8th house that would make me think like really, really good romantic synastry. So really it would depend on what Joe's rising sign is to say if they had lots of really good romantic synastry. They have like better like private life, career synastry, in my opinion, or at least supporting Taylor's career, because they got synastry in the 2nd house, which is the singing house, synastry in the 3rd house, which is public relations, synastry in the 4th house, which is private life, and then a little bit of synastry on the descendant line, which is obviously all partnerships, but just based on most of the rest of their synastry being in more business orientated kind of themes. It's kind of giving more the business side of the descendant rather than the romantic side of the descendant. You know that the romantic side of the descendant's involved when there's also synastry between the 5th and 8th house in particular, but kind of you want it all on that side of the chart. You want it kind of spanning the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th houses. It's kind of the best kind of synastry for romantic relationships. And so I'm kind of not seeing that here without knowing what his rising sign is. I might plug in a few possibilities of his rising sign and just have a look at it personally, maybe do a follow-up video of this, of like, this is what it would need to be in order for them to have good romantic synastry, and this is what it couldn't be if it's going to be bad, like what I spoke about before. Like, I'd rather see him as a Leo rising for romantic synastry, but I really think he might be a Cancer rising. So yeah, that's kind of the vibe, which is super interesting because obviously there are some rumors that it was a PR relationship and that it wasn't necessarily romantic. I don't know if I really believe that, to be honest. I'm a bit of a like, the simplest explanation is the best explanation, and so I'd just like to believe that it was what it was, and it was never going to go down that like permanent or more long life romantic path, which it seems like Taylor always had the vibe of, according to her most recent interviews. But yeah, do with this what you will, essentially. If you really believe this was a PR relationship, like, I'm not saying no based on the Synastry. Like, the Synastry I'm seeing, I'm like a little bit leaning that way. However, yeah, I'm just like more of the simplest explanation is the best explanation, girly. So I'm just going to assume that it was real and that somehow they have some sort of Synastry where Joe's being supported back and he's not only supporting Taylor's career. And there is some more kind of romance vibes. Based on like a cursory glance, like I've said, the only way I really see the romantic thing working really is if Joe is a Leo rising, which I would find hard to believe, but it's possible because if he is a Leo rising, then the Venus North Node Saturn conjunction all happens in his 7th house, which would be cute, especially if he's a really early Leo rising. It's not so cute if he is a later Leo rising, because then it would be happening in his 12th house. But then also Taylor's Mars would potentially fall in his 5th house, giving them some sexual chemistry, which based on the rest of the chart doesn't kind of look like it so far. And also their Venus Pallas conjunction potentially could fall in his 8th house, which again would be more like potentially soulmate-y relationship kind of vibes. So yeah, honestly, the only way I really see them really working and it being like such a little fairy tale romance is if he's a Leo rising. For a Leo rising, I would want to see more cat-like features on the face. My grandmother's a Leo rising, you can really tell. Lots of really thick hair, and also like very warm, like very kind of my tone, like warm, looks like they've been in the sun. Leo's ruled by the sun, not super luminous as Joe appears in my opinion. So yeah, it's a bit of a stretch, but never say never. I'm not saying nothing. Those are just my astrological opinions based on what I can see. Hi Wildings, this is Editing Jade, inserting myself into your video because I have lost some footage of myself basically summarizing everything that we've just spoken about, and talking about the possibility of Joe being a late degree Cancer rising according to Placidus house systems. So basically, to summarize the points that I've just made, according to whole sign astrology, Joe would have to be a Leo rising in order to have any romantic synastry with Taylor Swift. If he is not a Leo rising, they don't really have any romantic synastry. However, based on Joe's appearance, it's just very, very, very unlikely that he is a Leo rising. Like, to say that he would be a huge, huge, huge stretch. So in my opinion, I think he's much more likely a late degree Cancer rising. And if you look at his chart as a late degree Cancer rising, it makes a lot more sense. First of all, in terms of his appearance fitting, but then also based on him then having kind of similar romantic synastry with Taylor. He would have some 5th house synastry, which is good for romance and sexual connection. Taylor's Mars and Sun would both be in Joe's 5th house. They would also have some synastry with the 7th house. So Taylor's Venus and Vesta would be in Joe's 7th house. So yeah, in my professional astrological opinion, I would say that Joe would have to be a late degree Cancer rising in order for his romantic relationship with Taylor to make sense. If he is any other rising sign, which he definitely could be, a lot of the other rising signs that are possible for him would put a lot more placements in his 5th house, which is tied to acting, in his 2nd house, which is tied to the voice, in his 3rd house, which is tied to PR, and in his 10th house, which is obviously tied to career, that might make more sense for him, as especially as an actor, but also as, obviously being credited as William Bowery on some songs of Taylor's. So yeah, even though the Cancer rising makes sense for his appearance, and that's the only way that him and Taylor would have romantic synastry together, even then, even though the appearance makes sense, it does cause other problems when it comes to looking at his career stuff. So while the late degree Cancer rising does work in terms of his appearance and his for having any romantic synastry with Taylor Swift, there is just a lot of problems with it. The career stuff, obviously, he wouldn't really have the best chart for his career, but to be honest, he hasn't done super major stuff that would make me think that he should have a super crazy chart. And the one redeeming quality with the way that his chart would be orientated as a late degree Cancer rising is that he would have his Venus really close to his MC line, which is a bit of a famous for being famous kind of placement. Kim Kardashian has her Venus conjunct her MC line, and just based on how Joe's career has gone so far and him dabbling in little bits and pieces but not necessarily being super strong in one thing, especially in terms of how the public is perceiving him, he's a little bit more famous for being Taylor Swift's boyfriend at this point. It works. It barely works, but it does work. You would just have to look at him as not a serious singer and not a serious actor and more famous for being Taylor's boyfriend, and then it works. If you were looking at him as a famous singer, famous actor, any of that, it really doesn't, to be honest. It doesn't work. And also the other problem with Joe being a late degree Cancer rising is there's just such a narrow window in which he would have to be born based on his place of birth. So according to his place of birth, at the time that Cancer was rising over the eastern horizon at a late degree, the 1st, 2nd, 7th and 8th houses were all super, super, super narrow. Meaning that, yeah, if the window's just super, super tight, he would have to be born at a very specific time to make it all work and to make everything fit and to make some of these placements align into the houses that we want them to align into. So essentially this tiny little window is the only way that Joe and Taylor feasibly work as a romantic couple. Basically, if Joe has any other rising sign, it would bode better for his career, especially if he wants to continue being successful. But essentially, it would be making me lean more towards having the opinion that their relationship was potentially PR and maybe not as deeply romantic as it has been made out to be in the media. So all the stars would really need to align here for Joe and Taylor to work romantically, astrologically speaking. We've got a very small window in which it is possible for Joe to be born to make their relationship romantically feasible according to astrology. And basically any other window that he's born in outside of this about half an hour in which Cancer was rising over the eastern horizon at a late degree just would not bode well for them having any sort of romantic relationship and would be much more suggestive of the popular conspiracy theory online that they were in a PR relationship and it was not as romantic as what it was made out to be in the media. It's a little bit pushing it, but sometimes you just got to believe the simplest explanation is the best explanation. So maybe he is. I don't know. It is what it is. That's the vibe. Okay, let's just move on because I can't keep doing disclaimers because I think I'm not helping myself now. I think I'm digging myself a hole. But yeah, let's move on. Okay, so moving on to Taylor Swift's synastry with Karlie Kloss, which is who she was rumoured to be with before she was with Joe Alwyn. And for obvious reasons, it was not a public relationship. It was a alleged private relationship. I don't know what I can and can't say, but I'm doing my best just to this is an alleged relationship she was in that seems legit. Okay, but what I can tell you about this chart is there is a lot going on in this chart. There is so much going on in this chart. And obviously because we know both of we're pretty sure we know both of their house orientations, there's just more information to kind of go off, which is nice. I will say straight off the bat that I first of all, love that they have some really good 5th house synastry, which is really good for like obviously romance, especially kind of like sex, dating, like all the fun stuff. So Taylor's Mars, Pluto, Juno, and Lilith all fall in Karlie Kloss's 5th house of romance. So bringing in a lot of energy to Karlie Kloss romantically. Mars and Pluto are both very sexual. So I kind of love that vibe. Like 5th house synastry with Mars does hit. I have to say, like that is definitely a vibe. Juno and Lilith also being there is nice. I think Juno would help in terms of the more romance side and keeping it not all sexual. And Lilith, I think, just makes things a bit more spicy, a bit more fun. The other thing I will say that I love is I love that Taylor's Saturn hits right on Karlie Kloss's descendant line. Because again, as I spoke about before, I love Saturn synastry to descendants, Venuses, things like that, especially the descendant because it rules contracts, and Saturn is exalted in Libra for a reason. It loves marriages. Like Daddy Saturn, it vibes off marriages. So it loves being conjunct someone's descendant line, and that's a really good omen for long-term permanent commitment. However, again, I will say meeting someone before their Saturn return with this kind of aspect is much more challenging. It's much less likely to go in that direction because Saturn's immature, and that person may not be ready to make that commitment. It would have been better if Karlie Kloss and Taylor Swift had a cross paths at least a little bit closer to Taylor's Saturn return, which I think was in 2019. So potentially after their I think their relationship was like full ended by then. Saturn on the descendant, such a good vibe, but just like the timing of things, not the best vibe. Like it makes me much less surprised that they broke up based on that. However, I will say like they do have some good synastry in terms of like potentially getting back together in the future and like making it work, especially because Taylor's Venus falls in Karlie Kloss's descendant house, and it's also conjunct her Ceres asteroid, which again is like very nurturing energy. So like it just seems like there's a lot of potential for love there, a lot of potential for like a really good connection, especially because Taylor's North Node and Vesta also fall in Karlie Kloss's 8th house, which is again more of the soulmatey, like I would die for you kind of energy, which Taylor, if you're watching this, we know that you would die for Karlie Kloss. Especially because Vesta's like the flame that doesn't go out. I don't know. It's just, I love 8th house synastry because it does kind of give like Romeo and Juliet for sure. And yeah, like it is cute. I would say probably one of the major differences between Joe and Taylor and Karlie Kloss and Taylor is it seems like, just from what I can see, like just straight away at a glance, the synastry between Joe and Taylor seems like Joe supporting Taylor. The synastry between Taylor and Karlie Kloss seems like Taylor's more supportive of Karlie. Like it seems like Taylor almost has more to offer her in a way. Not that Karlie has nothing to offer, because there is some good stuff here too. It's just not, the relationship does seem imbalanced, where Taylor's offering more in this connection with Karlie, and in a similar way, but maybe not exactly the same as the relationship with Joe, where Joe was offering more to Taylor. So it would seem, just based on hypothetically what his rising sign would be. Okay, now let's go into the ways that Karlie supports Taylor. Okay, so first of all, Karlie has her Mars and Juno in Taylor's 7th house of marriages, business partnerships. Again, don't love Mars in the 7th. However, I will say because it's conjunct Juno, this is better because Juno will be softening it. Juno's a wifey energy, so it's just nicer, especially because this conjunction also trines Venus and Ceres conjunction. So Mars here won't be able to act as much of a malefic, because it's being so softened by so many loving energies. Juno's loving, Ceres is loving, Venus is loving. So that's a really good way to kind of counteract this Mars in the 7th house. But again, it kind of is a bit of an omen of like potentially going through troubles, maybe not being able to commit to each other for a long time, and just like having to work through a lot of stuff with that malefic in the 7th. But again, these are energies that Karlie's bringing into Taylor's 7th house. So this is the way that Karlie supports Taylor. So she's got Mars, Juno and Ceres essentially all going into Taylor's 7th house, and also all giving energy to Taylor's Venus. So that's really good vibe. She also has her South Node, which is a past life energy conjunct Taylor's Moon and Ceres asteroid. So this can definitely indicate being from the same soul family, because the Moon is the soul, Ceres is familial. So yeah, it kind of looks like they're from the same soul family, that they've incarnated and had, some sort of interaction in a past life. Both Ceres and the Moon is more of a mothering energy, so Taylor could have been Karlie's mum, especially because Karlie also has her sun on Taylor's South Node. Sun obviously rules the 5th house of children, so to me, it's kind of giving, I think, to be honest, in my opinion, I think Taylor was Karlie's mum in a past life, and they've reincarnated to experience each other as a different kind of love, a different kind of unconditional love. Like, it's been unconditional in the past. Obviously, the maternal love for a child is said to be the most unconditional love there is in the world. Now they're potentially experiencing it in another way, which I do love. I have to say I've grown to love this kind of synastry, past life synastry. I feel like it's more of a vibe than it gets credit for. Again, this is kind of giving more of Taylor supporting Karlie. Like, well, I guess, no, it does go both ways, because kids love their parent, I think, as unconditionally as parents love their kids. So yeah, there's definitely a vibe of unconditional love here for sure. The other thing that I like in terms of Karlie bringing Taylor energy is that her Leo stellium falls in Taylor's 9th house, where she has her South Node. And so, like, obviously this would be like not as much of a vibe if Taylor wasn't famous. Because Taylor is famous, her Leo house is her Leo sign is more important. And so all of Karlie's energy is kind of going into this 9th house, which, like, we'll talk about in a second, the 9th house part of it. But in terms of the Leo part of it, it is supportive of her kind of fame and success, which I kind of like. And in terms of being in the 9th house, in my opinion, in terms of relationships, is like soul partnership energy. If you've read Soul Partnership by Gary Zukov, like, that's the vibe. It's like you have so much to teach one another. And yeah, it's kind of like the spiritual aspect of the connection that's not the innate, unspoken spiritual aspect that's more 8th house energy. It's the more like we're actually working on being better humans and like being on our own spiritual journey as an individual, and how we do that, how we kind of co-create that together, how we use each other to figure out what our triggers are, how to heal them with love. Like, that's kind of 9th house vibe in relationships, which I do kind of love for them. As I mentioned in the previous section, you want kind of lots going on in all the houses between the 4th and 9th, or more specifically, I would say the 5th and 9th. The 4th isn't that important. But it is just nice, given that it's like the family, private life kind of vibe. Like, some 4th house synastry is nice. So yeah, I kind of like that Karlie's giving energy to Taylor in those two ways, in terms of Taylor's like fame, success, public life that she's chosen as a career, but also like spiritual personal development that's more conscious, where you have to like make the conscious effort to grow as a person. So yeah, I do love that for them, to be honest. Like, those are some cute ways that Karlie's giving Taylor energy. But yeah, I think it is stronger in terms of the energy Taylor gives Karlie than Karlie did Taylor. But I don't know. It's like, it's not a major difference. Like there's a major difference between the energy that Taylor and Joe give and receive from each other. The other thing that's obviously important to look at is Jupiter, given that Jupiter indicates the husband or the wife in astrology. So what's kind of cool is obviously Taylor's a Cancer Jupiter, and that means that her soulmate is going to have Cancerian qualities, like potentially be quite maternal, be like nurturing, and Karlie Kloss is a Cancer rising. So that makes so much sense. Like, you definitely want something going on with with Jupiter when it comes to, are these people potential for forever? If there's no Jupiter, no significant anything going on with Jupiter, it's just not a vibe. You want like maybe some either dominant placements, maybe a rising sign, something. You want something going on with Jupiter, and safe to say that the ascendant Jupiter kind of vibe absolutely checks out. Like that definitely could be a forever connection. Also, obviously, like Karlie being a Virgo, Jupiter's like not super crazy at a first glance. However, you can see that there's lots of blue lines coming up off this Jupiter, which is a good sign. And those blue lines go to, first of all, their descendant conjunction. So Karlie's descendant, but Taylor's Saturn conjunct the descendant. So you've got a soulmate energy going to a Saturn, which is contract, like locking it in, commitment, and descendant partnership. You also have the Jupiter sextiling the ascendant, which is like cute. However, it also does sextile both of Taylor's possible chart rulers. Like, I honor the traditional chart ruler, which is Mars, but her Pluto and Mars are both in Scorpio. So technically it sextiles both of those things, which is also cute. Hi Wildings, editing Jade again. I just realized that I forgot to mention something very important about when something is sextiling the ascendant. In this case, when Karlie's Jupiter or soulmate placement is sextiling Taylor's ascendant and her chart ruler, it also means that it is trining the most harmonious aspect, the descendant line. I might have thought that I led with that because that is by far the most important aspect to point out here, because obviously trines are the most powerful, or the most harmonious aspects, I should say. And the descendant line is the partner line, and Jupiter is obviously the husband or the wife or the soulmate. So considering Jupiter's position in Virgo, having it trine the descendant line is definitely a really good sign of a forever person. Once you've already looked at things like, is it in the person's rising zodiac, or is it conjunct the person's chart ruler, or is it close to the chart ruler, is it close to a dominant placement or something like that. Those are the more obvious things that I look for first, but obviously Jupiter trining the descendant and sextiling the ascendant, also a really good vibe. So I thought I led with this. As I'm editing, I realized I did not, and this is so important to include. So I'm adding it in after the fact. But yeah, now let's get back into the video and back into more of the points that we can see with these. And also, it's in Taylor's MC house, her 10th house of the public, which again is kind of cute because Taylor's obviously such a big public figure. It is just nice for Jupiter to be in there. Editing Jade here again to explain why this is so cute. I realized I did not do the best job of explaining why this is such a cute place for Karlie's Jupiter to sit. And this is because, in addition to obviously being the husband/wife and or the soulmate in astrology, Jupiter also indicates obviously a lot of healing, a lot of expansion, a lot of miracles. And so wherever Jupiter falls in our partner's chart, so wherever our personal Jupiter ends up falling in their chart according to the Synastry. When you put the two charts together, it can indicate where we have the power to expand our partner's personal life or public life or whatever it may be. In this case, Karlie's Jupiter falling in Taylor's 10th house indicates that she has the power to expand Taylor's career, and given her significance as a muse in a lot of Taylor's work, or her alleged significance in a lot of Taylor's work, I would say personally this is very true. Like, I think a lot of Taylor's inspiration with a lot of her writing has come from her relationship with Karlie, and I would say that Karlie has had an expansive influence on Taylor's career. And so, yeah, that's why it's also super cute, just especially considering like who Taylor is in the world, for her to be such a public figure and then to have Karlie's Jupiter fall in her 10th house. It is really nice. It is cute for that reason in in terms of the like miracles expansion, and yeah, like it's a very abundant placement, and I think you can see that in Taylor's career as a result of their relationship. So like I would say, to summarize, Taylor's Jupiter is much more, it's definitely got to be Karlie. Karlie's is like a bit more touch and go, like could go either way in terms of like, is Taylor her soulmate? They definitely have past life stuff going on, but like soulmate in this life, it's just a bit more ambiguous on Karlie's end. So the final thing I want to touch on is it definitely looks like there's some soul contract stuff with them. So first of all, Karlie's North Node sits almost exactly in between Taylor's Uranus and her Sun destined asteroid conjunction. Uranus obviously stores soul contracts, so it definitely seems like there's a soul contract destined for this lifetime, that most likely in terms of, it seems like I would say Karlie was always supposed to help Taylor's stardom or be some sort of support in her stardom, in her rise to fame. Kind of with that little conjunction, that's what it most looks like. It looks like the soul contract on the other end in terms of like Karlie and Taylor, because Karlie's Saturn and Lilith both conjunct Taylor's North Node. And so these are a little bit harsher. So it kind of looks like maybe Taylor has more to kind of make up for in their last life than Karlie does. Like it seems like Karlie's supposed to be here to support Taylor, but yeah, it seems like maybe, yeah, Taylor has a bit more to reckon with. I would say based on Saturn and Lilith being conjunct Taylor's North Node, it seems like Taylor has stuff to reckon with in terms of like maybe power. Potentially she had a lot of power in their past relationship, which would make sense if Taylor was Karlie's mum. Maybe she misused her power at times. Lilith kind of gives this like energy of like, you need to give this person more freedom, more autonomy. And Saturn, yeah, like it is kind of giving potentially there was like some sort of mindset of hierarchy of like, I'm bigger and better than you because I'm the parent, rather than looking at it more like I'm the shepherding you towards filling your destiny and making sure that you have that freedom and autonomy. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting just off a glance. That seems to be what their past life stuff is like figuring out together in this life, or had figured out together if they don't get back together. It could go either way. Like I would not be surprised if they got back together, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the past is the past. You know what I'm saying? Like could go either way with this. I think if the lessons aren't done, they will. If these soul contracts haven't played out, they will. If they have, maybe they won't. I think that's the major takeaway. Obviously, the other place that you can look at past life stuff is the 12th house, and they have similar stuff going on in the 12th house that would like kind of reiterate what we've just spoken about. For example, Karlie's Scorpio Pluto falls in Taylor's 12th house of her past life, which again is like disruptions of power. And so, yeah, it does seem like there's some, karma there in terms of that kind of like power dynamic, whatever power dynamic they shared in the previous life is not supposed to continue in this life. And then again, you've got Jupiter in you've got Taylor's Jupiter in Karlie's 12th house, which again can be an indicator of, potentially needing to give her more freedom. Jupiter's very expansive. And also like more care from a distance potentially, because you got the Moon, Ceres, which are both nurturing energies, but then the Jupiter as well as Vertex, which has to do with fate. So yeah, it just seems like it's kind of saying a similar thing. But I will say, Taylor's Chiron conjunct Karlie's ascendant. This is a deeply, deeply, deeply healing connection. Anytime there's Chiron ascendant conjunctions, it always indicates deep healing in the connection. So yeah, I think both people will grow. Usually the Chiron person grows more. Like, it seems like Taylor will do more healing, more growing in this connection, but the ascendant person also grows and heals as well. Yeah, like that's really a vibe. Like MGK and Megan Fox have a Chiron ascendant conjunction. It is a very powerful indicator of a healing connection. Probably the best indicator of a healing connection, I would say. And so yeah, I kind of love that for them. It's very cute. Obviously, there's just so much more to say about this chart. I think I've hit the major points. There is more, but you know, like, kind of is what it is at this point. Like, I feel like that's the major stuff that you need to know in their chart that I'm seeing straight away. And yeah, if you have any questions, leave them below and I'll do my best to answer them based on what I'm seeing in their charts. But yeah, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they have unfinished business, because it just seems like there's a lot to work out in this life. I don't know if they would have had the chance to do that in the short time they shared, considering they were also obviously, for obvious reasons, having to hide a lot of stuff in their relationship. I don't know if they got to actually focus on this. Yeah, overall, I would say that Karlie and Taylor have the more astrologically significant synastry than Joe and Taylor. And yeah, there's a much better chance that Karlie and Taylor would get back together and not Joe and Taylor. I would hazard a guess that it's much, much more likely that Joe and Taylor's time has been fulfilled as it was supposed to. I'm not 100% certain on Karlie and Taylor, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's a bit of a not over yet situation. So yeah, we'll just have to see how things play out, and you'll know if they get back together that part of their kind of soul work with each other is incomplete. Their soul contracts have not been completed, you know, which they could leave the earth plane never having done it, but I don't know. I kind of get the vibe that they might. Or more from Taylor, I think I'm getting the vibe that she at least wants to. So yeah, we'll see how things go. I hope you found that helpful. I hope you found that insightful in terms of like looking at people's synastry and interpreting it. I hope that having like a real life example of people that like obviously have not everything from their private life in the public eye, but a lot of their life goes in the public eye, to kind of feel the vibe. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I think I'm going to leave that here for today. I want to thank you for making it all the way through this video. Thank you so much for supporting me. I would love if you can leave a like, comment, and also subscribe, because it does help with the YouTube algorithm, and supporting me in making more content like this. If you have any requests, please leave them below. But yeah, until we see each other again, I think that's all I have to say about this. So ciao.